Hey everyone, it's Mikki here. You're listening to Mini Mikkipedia, and today I want to go through the list that I sent my email subscribers, which was 26 ways to nail 2025 or dial in 2025, one or the other. And whilst some of them will be pretty self-explanatory, others may require a little bit more explanation, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do it. And before I do, you guys know I'm a fan of transformation, of meal plans, obviously with Monday's Matter and My Flow and the Man Plan, etc. But I do know that for a lot of people, big change can be overwhelming. And whilst some people thrive in that environment of just sort of drawing the line in the sand and just going for it, a complete overhaul, I know that actually a lot of other people, they struggle with the whole concept of change. And I just want to remind you that the smallest of implementations is always going to be worth more than the grandest of intentions. And people often underestimate what they can achieve by just making small changes. And in part because small changes can almost scaffold upon each other. And whilst you might start out with the intention of a small change, over time, these things do become bigger and they can become anchors to more permanent and bigger change overall. Notwithstanding the effect that if you made any of these changes or picked 4 of them and sort of ran with them for the first couple of months and then maybe took on 2 more and then took on 2 more as the year progresses, if you were to reflect back this time next year at the beginning of 2026, you would be so amazed by how far you have come. So I always do want to sort of preface that with this. And just know these come from both sort of clinical experience, or from all of clinical experience, from conversations I have with friends and family, and also from what I read in the literature, and also conversations that I have with my colleagues. So you're in good hands when it comes to the quality of these suggestions, I would say. Number 1, if your spouse or partner wants to change their diet, the best thing you can do to support them is to actually do it with them. And whilst this sounds self-explanatory, believe you me, there are so many couples that I know, both friends and clients, who will instigate something for their partner yet not follow through themselves. And there is nothing harder for someone to make diet change or exercise change if the person they're around, even if they support them emotionally and psychologically, if they are exhibiting behaviors that aren't aligned with their partner's goals, it just makes it so hard for them to then follow through. Or they almost in their head have a reason not to do it. Now, I know that it is much more challenging if, for example, one of you needs to or wants to lose weight, yet the other might not necessarily need to. But you can still make changes that will assist them, like your dinners can change, for example, to reflect your partner's goals and not necessarily yours. So, for example, if you're having, say, spaghetti bolognese, maybe what you do is you also have the bolognese sauce with vegetables as opposed to the pasta. I mean, that's a very small idea, but you sort of get my drift. It's so much easier. And I will also say that if you have a child in your house where you want to make changes or require diet changes for them, i.e. they've been diagnosed with something, they have a food intolerance or anything like that, basically the whole family should probably eat that way, because it is just so hard for a child to make change if they're in an environment where it's not the easy choice to make. And again, super obvious to probably all of you. However, I do know families where sometimes the child gets blamed for not following through on the type of diet that they need to be eating, where the parent doesn't actually understand or can't see that the environment that child's trying to make change in is actually super difficult. So sometimes it's good to point out the obvious. Number 2, slow down your meal times and make sure you chew your food properly before putting your fork back up to your mouth. Again, this is one thing that I think a lot of people can benefit from, particularly if you have digestive issues or you find you go to a meal starving and then you end up overeating. so many people say to me that they grew up in a family where food was scarce and they had to eat everything super quick or else their brothers or sisters would eat it, or they were in boarding school. This isn't unique. A lot of us had this, So, I mean, if you grew up in the 70s or 80s, that was just probably your reality. So by committing to chewing your food, even to say, I'll chew my food 20 times and make that the thing that you do, even if you don't hit 20, if you've experienced or you are used to eating quickly in the past, this is definitely going to slow you down. And the reason why I explicitly say chew and swallow before putting your fork back up to your mouth is because this is something that I needed to teach myself to do. Because I would notice I'd almost shovel in my food and have to quickly swallow what's in my mouth before I took my fork up to put that next mouthful of food in. So yeah, that's why I'm suggesting number 2. Number 3, think about physical activity the way that you think about brushing your teeth. This is just part of your personal hygiene. Honestly, people use time as their major constraint, but I'm just going to say it, often it's priority. And it's your mindset around physical activity that has prevented you from doing it. So if you just shift the way that you think about it as this is just what you do, the way that you brush your teeth or brush your hair or shower, even if you start small again, you will begin to build that habit. And sometimes if you have it in your head that physical activity is something you have to do and you've got to make time for, then it's really difficult to get into a regular routine with it. Instead, if you are just making it part of your schedule, part of your everyday life, it is just so much easier. As a human, think about movement as part of who you are and not just something that you do. Number 4, drink 2 glasses of water upon waking up. We dehydrate overnight. And so often, if you're moving around the day dehydrated, you can experience brain fog, irritability, fatigue. Your body has to work harder to pump the blood around, and therefore everything feels harder. Your exercise is diminished, and we can mistake thirst for hunger. So if you get into the habit of drinking 2 glasses of water with or without electrolytes in the morning, you're actually starting off on a really good foot. Number 5, base your decisions around how you want to feel, not how you feel right now. Because actually how we feel in the moment is almost never a good barometer of what to do. And I know this sitting here, I'm in my exercise clothing because I'm about to hit the bike, exercycle of course, after I record this episode. And that's the last thing that I feel like doing. And in fact, several times this week I woke up, the last thing that I felt like doing was training, but because it is actually just what I do, there was never a moment where it wasn't going to happen, but I certainly don't always feel like it. But I do want to feel like I've achieved something at the end of it, and I want to feel like I'm the person that is active. So base your decisions around how you want to feel, not how you feel right now. Number 6, use keto products like bread and muesli, keto bread, keto muesli, as condiments to a meal and not the main event. Too often when people quote unquote go keto or low carb, they switch out like for like, and their meals are still based around processed refined foods. These just happen to be processed refined keto low carb products. They're not necessarily more nutritious. They still could lack a lot of protein, and you're not actually getting your micronutrients. And they're calorie rich. So if you're doing keto as a fat loss plan, then merely by switching the bread in your sandwich to keto bread is not going to have the desired effect. Instead, occasionally use these products as a sprinkle on a smoothie bowl, for example, that is high in protein, or a slice of keto toast a couple of times a week with your scrambled eggs and protein in the morning. Don't rely on it as a diet staple. Number 7, if you are choosing to go keto for fat loss, make it dairy-free and nut-free so you don't fall into the trap of overeating these products. Now, there is nothing wrong with dairy. It is one of the most nutritious foods that you can eat. And nuts, of course, also contain fiber, contain nutrients, and dietary fat. However, often when people go keto for fat loss, they still overconsume calories, particularly things like cheese and nuts and cream. Therefore, they're not creating the calorie deficit that's required in order to drop body fat. And a keto diet for fat loss is actually a lower fat diet because the body is seeking out body fat to burn as a fuel source, and that is what is making up a lot of that component of energy. Therefore, if you are layering on a lot of dietary fat in your keto approach, it does make weight loss very difficult. And this is especially true for people who have quote unquote gone keto before and actually had success initially. Something changes. This is me clinically speaking here. Something physiologically changes for people who go on and off keto for fat loss, and they never seem to get that same initial success. And they almost become too comfortable with the dairy and the nuts, and therefore it's challenging to drop body fat. So if you take them out of the equation, it's going to be so much easier for you because your body can still produce ketones because it's burning body fat and not dietary fat. Number 8, go to bed 20 minutes earlier to allow an additional 2 hours sleep across a week. Sure, that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you are chronically sleep deprived and you're typically going to bed at, say, 11:30, yes, it's going to be so much better for you if you went to bed at 10 p.m., but sometimes that's just too much of a difference for a lot of people. So by gradually shifting your bedtime to slightly earlier, even by those 20 minutes, it's going to make a difference across the course of a week. And then you can do it again. But don't underestimate what 2 additional hours sleep a week could do to your energy and health. Number 9, full-fat dairy is associated with better health outcomes. However, if fat loss is a goal, then low-fat dairy is likely a better choice for most people. And this just comes down to calories. If full-fat dairy is not a non-negotiable for you, then make that easy change. Instead of full-fat Greek yogurt, go for that high-protein, low-fat yogurt, or even the De Winkle's plain unsweetened, or Gopala. It's so much lower in calories. And at the end of the day, it's the calorie deficit that you're after. With cheeses, again, be mindful of the type of cheese that you use, and maybe you just use 10 grams as opposed to like 50 grams of cheese. That'll make a huge difference to your calorie intake. And if it's the texture that you're after and not necessarily a flavor, you can actually make a bit of a difference to the calories if you switch from tasty to edam. So just be mindful of those choices. Number 10, if you are an omnivore that is consistently low in iron, increase your portion size of meat and the frequency that you eat it. I talk to so many people, women in particular, who are low in iron and still eat meat, yet they don't eat enough of it. They've been taught that 3 times a week is the optimal amount for eating red meat, and any more is just not ideal for health. And to be honest, nothing could be further from the truth, particularly because these are often health-conscious women who have a generally pretty good diet anyway. Of course, consistent low iron could be the result of other gut-related issues, but for the majority of people who do generally just run low iron, getting in good quality red meat, also including things like mussels, and I'm going to say oysters, although I know budgetary-wise that's not a reality for a lot of people, but these things are also rich in iron. So do not be afraid to eat your meat and eat it daily. Number 11, if getting your cholesterol measured, get it done after an overnight fast and in a rested and recovered state. Dietary intake affects your triglyceride levels, and therefore you can't get a good read on your overall cholesterol panel, which includes triglycerides, if you're going after your eating. And I know that the laboratories say that it doesn't matter whether you go fasted or fed. That's just not true. And I think it must be a logistical reason with which they say that. And it's not based on what we understand about cholesterol metabolism. Ideally, you'd go after 10 to 12 hours in a fasted state. You don't want to go too long, like going 16 or 18 hours and then going to get your cholesterol measured. That can actually increase the reading of the cholesterol because it is very labile to change. And you do want to go when you're not sick, when you don't have an injury or any other reason for your body to ramp up its production of cholesterol, because cholesterol is an innate part of our immune system, and it's one of the first things that increases if we have an injury or we're inflamed or we have an infection. So you need to be rested and recovered to get a true reflection of your cholesterol on that day. And look, to be fair, you would do it the same time of the morning 5 times in a row, and then repeat it at the same sort of time a month if you're a woman in 12 weeks or 16 weeks time or something like that. Like, it's actually probably better to get an average but not many people have the resources to be able to do that. Number 12, when building your meals, make the protein and carbohydrate a 1-to-1 ratio. So often we overload our plate with carbohydrate and we don't focus on the protein. And from a blood sugar perspective, your blood sugar is going to be better balanced for you macro counters if you do a 1-to-1 ratio or below. And the exception to this is if you've done heavy training and you need that recovery. Other than that, if you're having 40 grams of protein in a meal, try not to max out over 40 grams of carbohydrate. Number 13, if you can't see how your diet plan fits in with the rest of the family, just focus on your breakfast and lunch and eat the way the family eats for dinner. You can still make really good progress across a year. And if you think about it, breakfast and lunch will be 2/3 of your intake. So do not stress about that. And I sort of single out dinner as for most of us, we do have our individual sort of meals for those first couple of meals. Number 14, if you are plant-based, include an essential amino acid drink with at least 2 of your meals during the day. Plant-based protein is typically, well, 1, it's lower in bioavailable protein overall, but 2, it's lower in leucine, which is the amino acid which initiates muscle protein synthesis. So by pairing your lower protein meal with an essential amino acid drink that has about 3 grams of leucine or at least 2.5, examples of this might be Musashi or the Balance amino acid complex. That is going to then top up that leucine component of that meal and provide your brain with the substrate it needs to help with that repair and recovery process. 15, remember that feeling fat is just that, a feeling. Moving your body and or having a meal that is aligned with your goal can change this almost instantly. 16, the next meal is the next opportunity to act in alignment with your goals. Not the next day, not the next week, not the next month, the next meal. It's always what happens next that makes the most difference. Number 17, 10 minutes of exercise is always better than no minutes of exercise. Number 18, swap out half of your starchy carbohydrates for green vegetables in your lunch meal. This is particularly true if you fall asleep after your lunch. 19, if you have trouble sleeping and follow a low carbohydrate diet, add back in a serve of potato or sweet potato in your evening meal. Carbohydrates at night have an effect on your nervous system, which helps calm you down. It also helps your body produce serotonin, which in turn produces melatonin. And that is your sleep hormone. It's much more than that, actually, but we know it as our sleep, or our darkness hormone is another way to think about it. Number 20, if you choose to drink alcohol, enjoy it before dinner rather than after dinner, as there's a natural cutoff point that will reduce the overall amount that you drink. If you are someone that can drink all the way through and then want to clear up drink, you can always end up drinking too much, even if you intend not to. And it is harder for the person in that scenario to cut off drinking than it is if you're a person who enjoys that drink before dinner and doesn't care about a drink after. If you can shift that habit, you will easily reduce your alcohol intake. 21, skipping meals is almost always a bad idea for sustainable fat loss. You can then end up overeating later in the day or in the week, and you can underdo the amount of protein that you need, so you can lose a lot of muscle mass. That then impacts on not only your fragility and your strength, but also when it comes to maintaining your new body weight, makes it so much more difficult because you don't have the muscle mass there to help improve and maintain your basal metabolic rate, which will always drop when you diet anyway, but it drops a lot more when you lose muscle mass. 22, put a long-term time frame on any diet and exercise goal. You will not regret the time you put into achieving this across a year. You really don't. Yes, it's an effort to make diet change and to change your exercise habits, but you never regret it because of the progress that you can make. 23, changing your food and your exercise habits literally change you as a person. This transformation that you can't see is the most important one. And I can't even describe to you unless you've been there and done that. This is something you actually just have to experience, and it literally changes you. So don't think that you are just a fussy person, you don't like X, Y, Z. You change, your tastes change. 24, prioritize 2 hours per week for your food prep. Having food that aligns with your goals on hand will change your diet without you having to make micro decisions across a day. And you know that as well, right? So as soon as you put into that time for food prep, all of these other little decisions around what to have for breakfast or what to have for lunch are immediately gone. And you already know what you're doing, and you don't have to question this across the course of a week. 25, choose a new recipe every couple of weeks to try. Again, you might think you are fussy around food, but your tastes change. And I do say this because I have so many people skeptical coming into my plans, and they cannot believe how much they enjoy a lot of the recipes that they didn't think that they were going to. That can be you as well. And worst case scenario, you don't like it. So what? You just don't make it again. But over time, you will begin to increase your repertoire of having good food options around that align with your goal. And number 26, this is a big one. Not everyone wants you to change. So not everyone will be on board with your decisions. And be prepared for some pushback from unlikely places, and be really clear on why you're doing what you're doing. It doesn't matter what others think, but it can feel like it matters in the moment. Make coming back to your why a daily exercise. Why are you doing what you're doing? You've got to be really strong on that. This doesn't mean you have to be super strong on it to begin, but you have to be strong on it throughout the process. Otherwise, it's just too easy to slip back into those default habits that have been our way of doing things forever. So I would love to hear from you. Do any of these resonate? Can you relate to any of numbers 1 to 26? Do you have other small changes which could easily go in this list? I would love to hear it. You can connect with me over on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter at Mikki Williden. You can go to Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, or hit me up on my website, mikkiwilliden.com, and send me an inquiry through there. I'd love to hear from you. All right, team, you have the best week. See you later.